of handling the busy. Here's what happens. Your stress hormones rise and stay there. Your executive function in the prefrontal cortex declines. That means your memory, your judgment, your impulse control deteriorate, and the brain areas for anger and anxiety are activated. Do you feel that? Here's the thing. You can be as busy as an emergency department without feeling like you're crazy busy. How? By using the same tactics that we use. Our brains all process stress in similar fundamental ways, but how we react to it has been shown by research to be modifiable, whether it's emergencies or just daily, day in, day out stress. Now contrast crazy busy mode with how I think of us in the ER, ready mode. Ready mode means whatever comes in through those doors, whether it's a multiple car pileup or a patient having chest pain while stuck in an elevator, or another patient with an item stuck where it shouldn't be, when you know you're dying to ask. Yeah. Even on those days when you would swear you were being punked, we're not afraid of it. Because we know that whatever comes in through those ER double doors, that we can handle it, that we're ready. That's ready mode. We've trained for it, and you can too. Here's how. Step one to go from crazy mode to ready mode is to relentlessly triage. In crazy mode, you're always busy, always stressed, because you're reacting to every challenge with the same response. Contrast that with ready mode, where we triage, which means we prioritize by degree of urgency. This isn't just a nice way to get your to-do list done. Work by Dr. Robert Sapolsky shows that individuals who cannot differentiate threat from non-threat and react to everything with the same response have double the level of stress hormones, which is why this is the first skill to learn. You can't take care of them all at once, but you don't have to, because we triage. Red, immediately life-threatening. Yellow, serious but not immediately life-threatening. Green, minor. And we focus our efforts first on the reds. Now hear this. Part of the problem in crazy mode is that you are reacting to everything as if it is red. So start by triaging correctly. Know your reds. They're what is most important and where you can most move the needle. Now, it's easy to be confused by noise, but what is noisiest is not always what is most red. In fact, my severe asthmatic patient is most at risk when he's quiet. But my patient over here demanding that I bring her flavored coffee creamer, she's noisy, but she's not red. I'll give you an example from my own life. Last spring, my house flooded. My 1-year-old was in the ER. I was supposed to do a fundraiser for my 4-year-old's school, and the final chapter of my book was beyond late. Maybe not ironically, that was the chapter on stress. My red tasks were getting my 1-year-old better and finishing my book. That was it. Remember, relentlessly triage. The house flood repair, well, once we had stopped and stabilized the damage, it was no longer a red. It felt red, but it was in fact just noise. No, really, it was quite noisy. This picture on the far right is me wearing earplugs to focus on my book while the floor is being mechanically dried around me. Know your reds, and do not let your non-reds distract you from them. By the way, it is liberating with a green task to every once in a while be able to remind yourself, that's a green task. No one's gonna die. It's okay if it's not perfect. Now there's one last triage level that we use in the worst scenarios, and that is black. Those patients for whom there's nothing we can do, where we must move on. And although it is gut-wrenching, I mention it because you each have your own equivalent black tasks in your life. These are items that you must take off your list. And I think many of you know what I'm talking about. For me, This was the fundraiser. I had to step down. Because as we in the ER know, if you try to do everything, you have no hope of saving your reds. Step 2, to go from crazy mode into ready mode, is to expect and design for crazy. Half of handling crazy is how you prepare for it. So step 1, we triage. Step 2, we design to make those tasks easier to do. Science shows us that the more options we have, then the longer each decision takes. And the more decisions we have to make, then the more exhausted our brain gets, and the less it is capable of making good decisions. Which is why this step 2 is about finding ways to reduce your daily decisions. Here are 4 easy examples you can use in your daily lifestyle. Plan. Plan your entire week's meals on the weekend so that when it's Wednesday at 6 p.m. and everyone's hangry and requesting pizza, you have no decisions to make to get a healthy meal on the table. Automate. Never leave anything to remember that you could automate, whether it's scheduling it as recurring or saved list or recurrent purchases. Co-locate. When it comes to exercise, store all the equipment that you need for a certain activity together, charged and ready so you don't spend energy looking for it. And decrease temptations. For anyone driven by sugar cravings, anyone? Say aye, go ahead. That itself is its own form of crazy mode and self-medication for crazy mode. But stop working your willpower. Design differently. If a food is out of immediate reach, such that you have to use a stool to reach it, even when it's chocolate, study participants ate 70% less without thinking about it. I know, let that sit for a second. Design to make the choices you wish to make easier. Which brings us to the 3rd step, to go from crazy mode to ready mode, and that is to get out of your head. Come with me, different story. I'm working in a small satellite ER when a woman comes in labor. I realize that the cord is wrapped, not once, but twice around the baby's neck, and I'm the only doctor. I was scared, but I couldn't let it derail me. Because you see, we all get nervous. We all get scared, but it's what you do next that matters. That first feeling isn't the problem. It can be an important sign. The problem comes when we let it derail us, when that internal monologue starts and we catastrophize and we start to get that tunnel vision. That's how you think when you're in crazy mode, and you cannot solve anything that way. Now, I promise to come back to this story, but first, how do I get out of my own head? There are many tactics that you may hear, but for me, I find it best in the moment to actively put my focus on someone else, to deliberately make myself see the person in front of me, see myself in the arena with them. What do they need? What do they fear? And how can I help? This may sound like a whole lot of warm and fuzzy to you, but it's not. In fact, research shows that when you prime your brain with what is essentially compassion, we disrupt that tunnel vision and internal monologue. You widen your perception so your brain can actually take in broader information, so you see more possibilities and can make better decisions. Try it. Know that your internal monologue can derail you. And realize that when you get out of your own head, you get out of your own way. Now, what happened to that baby? I focused not on my fear, but on the mother and the baby and what they needed me to do. Got the cord off of the baby's neck, and a healthy, screaming, kicking baby arrived just as a dad ran in from the parking lot. Hi, you have a son. I'm Dr. Daria. Congratulations. You want to cut the cord? And for a moment, the strong cries of a newborn drowned out the beeps and the sirens that are the normal sounds of the ER. But there was also something else. Because when I walked back out of that mother's room, I saw several of my other patients hovering nearby. I suddenly realized that despite their own problems that had brought them to the emergency room, they had all come together to root for this baby, and they now together shared in the joy. Because that is what happens when you go from crazy mode to ready mode. Others notice. They want it too. They just don't know how. They just need one example, which could be you. Own the busy, but stop calling it crazy. You've always had that ability, but now you're ready. Thank you.
All right. She has an awesome dress. I just have to say it every time I watch her. I think that dress is so amazing. But let's not get off track here. So let's think then about the sheets that you have in front of you and how to apply what you learned from Dr. Daria to your own lives. And one of the things I really loved about her presentation is that she seamlessly knits together the balance between professional and personal. And so everything that she talked about certainly applies to both sides of our lives, but she does it in a way that is just so integrated and probably pretty reflective of how things really are for all of us. So let's just think through the sheets and how we can apply these things. So I'm going to go ahead and screen share again. All right. So we're thinking about how to go from crazy mode to ready mode and how to triage the things that are before us each day, each week, each month. And Dr. Daria gave us the emergency room categories. Well, they're medical categories of red, yellow, green, and black. And she gave examples of things that fell into the various categories from her own life in a situation that by all means would be extremely stressful. So what I'd like to invite you to do is to think about, I mean, if you're living in today and you're not sure where things go, you could focus on today. That would be great. Or you could focus on the upcoming week and all of those priorities and tasks that lie before you. And go ahead on this sheet and identify what would be minor or green, what would be yellow, serious but not immediately threatening, and red, immediately threatening, most important. She talks about life threatening, and you can put that in there. I was trying to stay a little bit away from the dramatic in that sense for us, since our work is a little bit different, but I'm sure it feels life threatening. I know sometimes it does to me in my mind. But and then black, the things that we need to step away from, because sometimes the crazy is when we're trying to shove everything into the red category, and the reality is we can't get all the reds done. So take a few minutes to think about your tasks and what you have before you today and or into next week, and try to distribute them across triage levels. So I'll give you a few minutes to do that. Okay, one more minute to finish up. Okay, does anyone want to unmute and just share with the group your experience of what it is to relentlessly triage your priorities? Any observations or experiences that anyone's willing to share? We are not in the sharing mode today. Well, I'll share that one of the things I noticed is that I think that I over triage into red and don't triage enough into black. So there are some things I should probably walk away from, and I need to really evaluate that and just say, these are things that don't fit right now, and they're not going to be done. Because if I don't reassign some things to black, then trying to crowd everything into red, yellow, and green is probably still going to feel crazy busy. So that's an observation that I made in doing this. How about you? Anybody else want to share something they experienced or observed? Okay, well, let's move on then, and let's go ahead and look at the next sheet, which is the crazy mode versus ready mode. And what we want to be focusing on is how to get the crazy out of ready, right? And so Dr. Daria gave 3 strategies for that. The first is to relentlessly triage. The second is to expect and design for crazy. And the third is to get out of your head. So we just did a little triage activity. And I think the bottom line there is that if we triage relentlessly and well, then we will better be able to focus our energy and effort on the red. And we also will avoid responding to everything before us as if it's red. And Dr. Daria gave the example, what's noisiest is not always red. And so that, I think, is a really interesting observation, that sometimes the things that are making the most noise around us really aren't the things that are the most important, most, threatening, most in need of our attention. So moving from there into expect and design for crazy. Dr. Daria gave us some strategies, and I'm hoping that something in all of that stood out to you. She talked about planning. She talked about automating. She talked about co-locating, which I think really has to do with great organizational strategies. Why run around the house getting everything you need to leave in the morning when you can put it all in one place and it's ready to go? She gave that example with exercise equipment. And then she also talked about designing differently. And the example that she gave was to decrease temptations. And I thought a lot with that one about even just the presence of what Dr. Daria called noise, which is the noise that comes from our cell phones and and email and those types of things. Those are really important, and there are times to respond to them, but typically we don't know what's read until we get into them, and we don't always triage well and have good strategies up front. So designing differently to decrease temptations. I think everybody's familiar with strategies around put the cell phone down, do 20 minutes of work intensely, and then pick it up and see what's come in, or then go to your email and see what's come in. I loved the study that she cited that had to do with if something is up out of the way, awkward, or more takes more steps to access, we're less likely to go after it, even if it's chocolate. So that was the second one, and hopefully you picked up a strategy or two there that you want to try. And then third is getting out of your head. And we've talked some about the inner monologue, the inner thoughts and feelings that can come that divert our attention or that drain our energy and get in the way of us focusing on what is most important. And Dr. Daria had a great quote that she shared. Well, it's her own, but it's a great quote that we can take from her presentation. And that is, we all get nervous and scared. It's what you do next that matters most. So nervous and scared are shared human feelings and emotions. And it really is how we use these steps to focus in and take that next step that's going to matter the most. And she mentions that when we get out of our own head, we get out of our own way. So we've talked about some strategies for getting out of our heads, going beyond our own immediate rush of feelings. Box breathing has been one of those that I've heard from a lot of people that they use and find helpful. There's other things we've talked about as well. So hopefully you can think about those strategies. And so finally, my challenge to you is to identify an action step or a commitment that you want to identify today to move into the rest of today and into next week and the months ahead. So identify that, and we will be closing out from there. It would be great after you've identified your action step, if you don't mind just giving everybody a word of encouragement in the chat as you exit out and go on to your day, remembering that you want to triage, expect and design for crazy, get out of your own head in order to get that crazy out of your busy. Thanks you guys so much for tuning in today.